Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Buenos días a todos. Buenas noches desde Indonesia. ¿Cómo estáis? Espero que todos bien. Welcome to the online training course on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation for Caribbean Community, CARICOM and Central American Integration System CICA. I am Lydia. I feel so honored to be your master ceremony today and very excited to be along with you in this virtual meeting room. Over the next few days, this meeting will provide you plenty of opportunities to discuss, start knowledge and insights. Thank you for being able to be here in your tight schedule. I am sure it's really hard to reject our invitation to join this online training, isn't it? This event is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, the Non-Aligned Movement Center for South-South Technical Cooperation, and Institut Teknologi Bandung, in collaboration with Indonesia's National Disaster Management Agency (BNPB) and the Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysical Agency (BMKG), to build capacity in a national disaster management authority, development and implementation of a methodological framework for disaster zone management. Ladies and gentlemen, believe me, today will be a fruitful day. Before we proceed, we would like to express our sincere gratitude, the first, for the Honorable Dean of the Faculty of Earth Science and Technology, Institut Teknologi Bandung, Dr. Irwan Milano, the Honored Director for American and European Interregional and Interregional Cooperation, Mrs. Nidia Kartikasari, the Honored Director for International Development Cooperation, then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Mrs. Maria Renata Hutagalung, the Honorary Representatives of CARICOM Secretariat, Ambassador Diar Nurbintoro, and also Excellency distinguished guest delegates, ladies and gentlemen. This event contains several sections. Let me read it for you. The first, we will have remarks and speech from our sincere gratitude that I hit before. The second, we will have a virtual photo opportunity. The third, we also have preliminary tests. The fourth, presentation or plenary session from our two speakers for today. And last, the closing. So now, without further ado, we would like to invite to the podium to deliver a welcoming speech. The first one, would you please to join me in welcoming and remarks for Acting Director for NAM CSSTC, Ambassador Dian Nurbintoro. Mr. Nurbintoro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lydia. Honorable Dean of Faculty of Earth Science and Technology, Institut Teknologi Bandung, Dr. Irwan Milano. Honorable Director for American and European Interregional and Interregional Cooperation, Mrs. Nidia Kartikasari. Honorable Director for International Development Cooperation, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic Indonesia, Ms. Renata Hutagalung, Honorable Representative of CARICOM Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, America, and good evening, Indonesia. Welcome to the online training course on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation for CARICOM and SICA member countries, organized by the Institut Teknologi Bandung with the support of the Non-Aligned Movement Center for South-South Technical Cooperation, NAM Center. In collaboration with the Republic of Indonesia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Agencies for Disaster Countermeasures, and Agency for Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysics. I'm very excited about organizing this activity because it gives me hope that guidelines and measures to reduce disaster risk in non-member countries will be disseminated, especially in light of the current global climate crisis. We have just completed the most critical phase of a non-natural disaster, namely the COVID-19 pandemic, but we still have natural disaster management homework to complete. Since government and scientists in various countries declared a climate emergency in 2016, the world has faced a variety of negative effects from climate conditions, one of which is natural disaster, which cause losses to the economic and social fibers of communities in the Caribbean and Central America. The World Meteorological Organization, WMO, submitted a public report titled State of the Climate in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2021, demonstrating how extreme weather and climate change are causing natural disasters to occur more than ever in the region. Extremely rainfall, land and marine heat waves, and glacier melt with consequences felt from the Amazon to the Andes, from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean, and all the way to Patagonia. As a result, this natural disaster caused damage to ecosystem, food and water security, and people health well-being in the Caribbean region and Central America. With the disaster risk experiences by countries in the Caribbean and Central America, whose risk level is nearly the same as Indonesia, I see a need for an exchange of knowledge regarding disaster risk reduction and climate policies and lessons between Indonesia and countries in the Caribbean and Central America. An adaptation so that every developing country is better prepared to deal with every change dynamics of disaster risk. Honorable Dean, Directors, ladies and gentlemen, the NAM Center thanks researchers and academics from the Institut Teknologi Bandung for their willingness to collaborate with friends from the Caribbean and Central American region to share their knowledge, experiences, and lessons learned in disaster management and climate change adaptation. The NAM Center has witnessed various ITB achievements and contribution to disaster management at the domestic level in Indonesia. We recently saw how an ITB student created floating settlement that could be used in flood-prone areas. One of the ITB academic recently introduced the concept of flexibility emergencies tents for natural disaster. ITB has also demonstrated its dedicated in the field of community service by routinely educating the community by providing socialization regarding earthquake and tsunami mitigation, where the socialization provides knowledge for the general public about what steps they should take when natural disasters occur in the residential area and their economic activities in order to reduce the number of fatalities. I sincerely hope that the positive influence that ITB researchers and academics have had on their students and the Indonesian people can be passed on to all of our Caribbean and Central American friends. This is the ideal time for developing countries around the world to promote innovation and become more daring in dealing with disaster risk, scaling up disaster management effort and climate change adaptation from the domestic to international levels. How we are doing now is the only way to save and sustain the planet. Honorable Dean, Directors, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the NAM Center, I have a few messages on recommendation for those present today as we work toward a brighter and more sustainable future. First and foremost, may the relationship between participation countries not end with the completion of this training on August 12, 2022. We hope that through this training, international coordination and synergy in disaster risk reduction, achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and climate change policies will be strengthened. Coordination and synergy will improve disaster risk management on a global scale. Second, participants are expected to be able to disseminate the conceptual framework for integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation to their colleagues in their respective offices. Of course, as more stakeholders become aware of it, joint implementation effort will intensify. Third, I encourage participants to provide feedback so that the lessons learned and successfully implemented in Indonesia can be refined to suit the geographical condition and situation in the Caribbean and Central America countries. I recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all solution due to diversity and uniqueness of each country. However, I'm confident that modifying existing lessons learned will result in universally applicable guidance. More than this 3 points, my deepest hope is that all countries participating today, whether Indonesia or countries in the Caribbean and Central America region, will be able to take a unified stance in international fora in response to disaster and climate crisis issues. Honorable Dean, Directors, ladies and gentlemen, the NAM Center is dedicated to assisting NAM member countries, CARICOM and SICA with disaster risk reduction policies and resilience building in disaster solutions situation. Only through close international cooperation. Thank you once more for your contribution to the success of this event organization. I wish you all the best with your family. Thank you. Good morning and good evening. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nurbintoro. Thank you for the warm speech and insightful from you. We also have Director of International Development Cooperation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Mrs. Maria Renata Hutagalung. Mrs. Hutagalung, this is my honor to give you the floor.
Thank you, Lydia. Ms. Nidia Kartikasari, Director for American and European Intra and Inter-Regional Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Ambassador Dr. Nurbintoro, Acting Director for Non-Aligned Movement Center for South-South Technical Cooperation, Dr. Irwan Melano, Dean of Faculty of Earth Science and Technology, Bandung Institute of Technology. Distinguished participants from Central American and Caribbean countries, good evening from Jakarta, and a very good morning to all the participants from the other side of the world. Through this capacity building program on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, Indonesia remains committed to contribute in the framework of South-South cooperation. The holding of this online training is just a few months since last May, when Indonesia hosted the 7th session of the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction under the theme From Risk to Resilience Towards Sustainable Development for All in a COVID-19 Transformed World. The biannual United Nations meeting was attended by more than 180 countries, more than 4,000 participants, and concluded the Bali Agenda for Resilience to prevent world from facing 1.5 disaster a day by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now facing unprecedented situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. It is even more important for us to harness South-South and triangular cooperation to respond decisively to global challenges, and more vital and strategic partnerships are crucial to overcoming this crisis in an effective and equal way. In the context of disaster risk and climate change mitigation, Indonesia has adopted and improved early warning systems to reduce risk from an increasing number of disasters. This training will also provide the opportunity to share knowledge and experience that would benefit our communities. Distinguished participants, I would also like to take this opportunity to convey my gratitude and appreciation to the NAM Center for South-South Technical Cooperation for its continuous support to provide capacity building program for developing and least developed countries. Appreciation also goes to the Bandung Institute of Technology for providing a platform to share Indonesia's best practices in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation to SICA and CARICOM member countries. It also provides the participants to optimize the time for sharing of best practices and lessons learned. For those who are joining this training online, of course, we look forward to welcoming you in Indonesia next year. And let me echo also Ambassador Diar's sentiments that was just said, that through this online training, We hope that international coordination and synergy can be enhanced on a global scale. Thank you again for the goodwill of all participants in joining this meeting. I wish you all the best. Stay healthy and wishing a fruitful discussion and training. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sutagalong. Ladies and gentlemen, that even at the beginning, so many spirits we can take from her. Now, the other from Director of American and European Interregional and Interregional Cooperation, Mrs. Nidia Kartikasari, please come to the virtual podium. Pleased to hear from you.
Good evening from Indonesia and good morning for colleagues. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay. His Excellency Ambassador Diarno Bintoro, Acting Director for NAM CSSTC, Dr. Iwan Meilano, Dean of Faculty of Earth Science and Technology Bandung, Ibu Maria Renata Hutagalung, Director for International Development Cooperation from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and participants from CARICOM and SICA countries. Good evening from Indonesia and good morning to colleagues in Caribbean and Central American region. I would like to start by thanking NAM CSSTC and Bandung Institute of Technology for organizing this online training course on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation for CARICOM and SICA member countries. I would also like to warmly welcome all of the participants from CARICOM and SICA member countries, as well as the Secretariat of CARICOM and SICA. As part of our solidarity towards SICA and CARICOM countries, we are grateful for the opportunity to share best practices as well as to learn from CARICOM and SICA with regards to your experience in disaster risk reduction and climate change mitigation and adaptation. I'm very happy to have received positive response to this online training from our friends in CARICOM and SICA. As regions comprising a large number of islands and due to our geographical location, Indonesia, CARICOM, and SICA are extremely vulnerable to climate change and natural disaster. In the next 5 days, I hope we can participate in the conversation, learning from each other, and build stronger network of professionals. As a continuation of this year's online training, we will organize a follow-up training next year in collaboration with Bandung Institute of Technology, funded by Indonesian Aid. And we hope to be able to welcome all of the participants physically in Indonesia. And there will be a lot of opportunities for field trips and practical sessions to complement the theories and models provided in this online training, and to provide you to more comprehensive understanding. As Indonesia's important partner, we look forward to exploring more collaboration with CARICOM and SICA. And believe me, you are in great hands. I wish you all the best for the next 5 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the sweet speech from Mrs. Kartikasari. Last but not least, now it's my deep pleasure to invite the Dean of Faculty of Earth Science and Technology, Institut Teknologi Bandung, Dr. Irwan Meilano. Dr. Meilano, my honor to give you the floor.
Thank you, Lydia. Honorable Director for Americans and Europeans Intra-Regional and Interregional Cooperations, Ibu Nidia Kartikasari. Honorable Director for International Development Cooperations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republics of Indonesia, Renata Hutagalung. Honorable Ambassadors Bapak Diar Nurbiantoro, Honorable Representatives of CARICOM Secretariat, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Bandung and good mornings to all friends from CARICOM and SICA member countries. On behalf of the Faculty of Earth Sciences and Technology, ITB, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the online training course on disaster risk reductions and climate change adaptations for CARICOM and SICA member countries. I would like to thank their excellencies and the team from the Non-Aligned Movement Center for South-South Technical Cooperations, NAM Center, in collaborations with the Republics of Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Agency for Disaster Management, BNPB, and Agency for Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysical, BMKG. I'm also delighted to welcome all participants and speakers of these trainings. Natural disasters are increasing worldwide. Earthquakes, tsunami, flood, typhoons, and other natural hazards continue to hit poor and vulnerable communities, causing tens of thousands of deaths, damage to infrastructures, and billions of dollars in economic loss globally each year. Since 1980, more than 2.4 million people and more than 3.7 trillion US dollars have been lost to natural disaster globally. Total damage increased by more than 800% from 18 billion per year in the 1980s to 167 billion US dollar per year in the last decade. All of natural disasters, 90% of them occurs in developing countries. Meanwhile, 82% of deaths due to the disaster occur in lower middle income countries. Population growth and rapid urbanizations lead to an increase in the disaster risk. The United Nations estimates that more than 2/3 of the world populations will live in the big cities by 2050. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Faculty of Earth Sciences and Technology, ITB, I would like to express our sincere thanks to NAM Centers, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, BNPB, BMKG, for their dedicated efforts and contributions for the online trainings course on disaster risk reductions and climate change adaptation for CARICOM and SICA member countries. I encourage each of the participants to share your experience and expertise on disaster risk reductions and climate change adaptations during the next 5 days and continue to exchange ideas through the resulting networks at the conclusions of the trainings. I wish you all constructive and fruitful discussions during the trainings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mailano. Bunch of spirits and insights we get from all the excellences. Next, we will have the virtual photo opportunity. I will count until 3 until my colleague touch the button. So please open all the camera and smile. Okay, I can see all of you are on. Okay, we are ready. Uno, dos, tres. Thank you. The next slide as well. Okay, I think there are still a lot of people that haven't turned on the camera yet. Would you please to join us? Thank you. It's really happy to see your face. Oh, nice. I can see your smile. Yeah, I will wait again until all of you turn on the camera. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. I think it's enough. Uno, dos, tres, smile. That's really wonderful. I really hope these photos will be a good and sweet memories for you all. And now we will have a preliminary test. And here I welcome Dr. Rais to the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Lydia. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, so before we start the session, before we start the plenary session, we would like to know the basic knowledge that you have, what kind of experience, what kind of understanding that you already have. So we would like to assess your knowledge by conducting short test, short exam. So this is a preliminary test. So please you can enter or to say you can open the website, our learning platform, www.edunext.itb.ac.id. I think you already tried it on the last week on Friday, and some of you I think already able to use the website. But if you still have problem that you cannot how to say, if you cannot access and you cannot log in to the website, please tell us. Okay, anybody still have problem to access EduNext, our learning platform? You can tell us. No? Okay, so I assume all of you already able to access our website, yeah? So allow me to share, to explain the how to use the EduNext to conduct the test, okay? Do you see my slide? Okay. So,
yeah, can.
so yeah, actually, this test is this test is conducted before the training begins, right? So don't worry if you get a low score because the training hasn't been conducted yet. So after this series of sessions already finished, and on Friday, you will be given the same test, and we will see whether there is an improvement on your score or not. So anyway, please enter the website edunext.itb.ac.id and press exam here. Okay. And then after that, you will see the test, the list of exam, and it is classified as quiz here, quiz. And then you can click a few detail here, the red circle here, please click it. And then there is a button to open. Okay, maybe you should see my presentation first. After that, we can try it directly to the website. Okay, so this is the example. So you will see a question from number 1. So every student, every participant has different answer. In the order is random. The order of questions is random. So so to minimize some some cheating or something like that. But anyway, this is the question, and you will see some options. Yeah, please select one option which is the correct one, and then if you already sure about your answer, please click next questions. For example, like this. So there is a question about what is the capital city of Indonesia, and there are several options here: Bandung, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, and Bangkok. So there are 4 options, and choose the best one. After that, you can click the next question. So after you click open or start exam, you have 15 minutes to finish the test. So please make sure after you click open or start, please finish the test. So, and then make sure to submit before it hits 00. And you can go back to previous question. And if you have an internal problem and other problem, maybe your laptop or your computer suddenly died and you want to change to another computer, you can try to access the website again, log again, and then reopen the exam. So you still have time. That your time is how to say, pause. Your time is pause, and then you still can continue your exam. So that's it. If you have any other issue, please tell us. So we can check here our training course page, and then you can click here exam like this and click open, or you can click the modules in the left side of EduNext. There is a modules, and then please click pre-test, and then there is a link for the exam page. And after that, you'll be directed into the exam page, and then click open like this. And then this is for a teacher page, but for students page, there is a button to start the exam. Okay. If you already have see the open button, please click open and you can start it. You have 15 minutes to finish it. Is there any question? Maybe somebody already started the test.
When should we start?
You can start now, from now. So everybody has 15 minutes after they click the button. So we have time up to 10 maximum, maybe 10 p.m. here in Jakarta, Jakarta time. So you can have maybe, we have 30 minutes to try. But I will check whether maybe in 15 minutes, if you already finish, all of you already finished, and then we can continue to another session. We can start presentation. Okay. Please tell me if you have some problem. Oh, okay, there's a problem. The loading is extremely slow. Okay. How many people has internet problem or connection, maybe loading problems? I think it's quite, it's very quiet. So I think people, the participant already started the test. Okay. Yeah, maybe Lydia, we can, how to say, idle. Yeah, we can be idle, and we will be standby. Yeah, so if you have some problem, if you have some question, please just ask us directly. Okay. I will stop my share, but if you need some assistance, please tell me. Yeah, I check half of the participants already started. Maybe 2/3 of the participants now already started the test. So maybe so somebody has problem, it chat, it give a private chat to me. So if you don't see the open option or open button, please refresh the page. Yeah, refresh the page. Okay. So open button is like this. If you still do not see the button, maybe you can try to close the browser and open it again. Okay, there are some people who have problems. I'm sorry, maybe I cannot chat directly to you, but if you still have problem, we will, how to say, we will try to note it first, yeah. If the problem still cannot be resolved, maybe we will give you additional time outside of the session, maybe tomorrow or yeah, or maybe after this after today presentation, yeah. So I checked there are two people already informed me about it. So please be patient. We will keep in touch with you later. Okay. So it's not a problem if you cannot cannot start the test now. So we will give you another opportunity later.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When we're done, is there any of us to see our scores, or do we get those later?
The scores. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
Yes, the scores. When we're done with the pretest, do we get to see our scores?
So you will have you finished the test?
Yes, I have.
Did you see the score?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So we have set it that everybody can see the score, but if you are not able, we will collect it and we will share it to you later. Okay.
Okay, perhaps I'll try to refresh if anything.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody can see the score, but it's strange. Maybe something happened. Something has some error. But anyway, we will collect the score later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's already 20 minutes past, so I think you already finished. All of you, most of you already finished the test because you only need 15 minutes. And I check, yeah, your score is not so, yeah, not so bad. It's still good. And we hopefully see later in the end of the course whether the score is improved or not. So thanks again. Thank you very much for participating in this test. And if you have questions, please tell us.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rais. Now it's getting more fun. So, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now we will come to our main program, plenary session, who will be led by our moderator, Dr. Alvita Puspahandayani from Institut Teknologi Bandung. Please join me to welcome Dr. Alvita Puspahandayani.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to online training course on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation for CARICOM and SICA member countries. My name is Alvita, and I will be moderator for this session. On the next 1 hour, we will have 2 topics to discuss. 2 panelists on this session will be Dr. Irwan Melano and Dr. Utrecht. We will have a question and answer session afterwards. First, I will invite Dr. Irwan Melano that will present the first presentation about basic framework of the disaster risk reduction. Dr. Irwan Melano is the Dean of Faculty of Earth Science and Technology, ITB. He is an earthquake scientist, geodesist, risk model and disaster model expert, lecturer, and a well-known earthquake researcher in Indonesia. Without any further ado, the place is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Alvita. Good evening from Bandung, Indonesia. Good morning, everyone. I'm very delighted to be part of this training course. And for today discussions, I'm going to share with you the topics related with basic framework of disaster risk reductions. As has been explained by Dr. Alvita, my name is Irwan Melano, and just to give you a brief background about my educations, I finished my undergraduate in 1997 from ITB, and I got my master degree from Nagoya University, Japan in 2003. And 3 years after, I got the doctoral degree from the same university in 2006. And my research interest for the last 10 years, I've been working on earthquake geodesy since 2000s. And also I joined the national teams for seismic hazard analysis in Indonesia. So we developed national earthquakes hazard maps. And also recently for the last 3 years, I helped the Ministry of Finance of Indonesia defining the disaster risk financing systems together with the World Banks. Okay, as I explained earlier, that after I finished my degree in 2006, I spent most of my time doing research until I became a dean in 2020. So it's very hard to find time to go for the fieldworks after I become a dean. But before that, and so almost every big disaster, after every big disaster in Indonesia, we did a survey. And the good news, or maybe not so good news, every year in Indonesia we have a big disaster, a big earthquakes, a big tsunami, significant flood, and so on. So it's a good and best place to study disaster, especially geological and hydrometeorological disasters. Okay, and for my today presentations, I'm going to divide into 4 different topics. The first one I'm going to share with you. I believe that most of you already understand, so I just going to refresh your knowledge about disaster risk reductions, and then and after that, for the second part of my talk, I'm going to share with you the global targets of the Sendai Framework on DRR, or SFDRR. And after that, I'm going to explain a little bit relations between DRR and Sustainability Development Goal, or SDGs. And I hope I still have a time to explain how we calculate disaster risk. So for the last 5 years, we estimate by using several models, we calculate the earthquake risk, tsunami risk, and flood risk in Indonesia on the national scales. And I really hope that, as mentioned by the Ambassador Diaz, that's really hope that next year we can meet, and we can invite you to come to Bandung and we discuss in detail how we estimate the disaster risk, especially for the earthquake, tsunami, flood, and other kind of disasters. Okay, let me start with showing the some disaster impacts. The figure on the left is an earthquakes in China, the magnitude 6.1 earthquakes that struck southwestern Yunnan province of China and kills almost 600 people. So 6.1 is not a big earthquake, but if the earthquake hit a vulnerable area, it may cause significant disasters. And a year after the Nepal earthquakes, the magnitude of these earthquakes is about 7, and 7,000 people killed by these earthquakes. It's quite massive earthquakes that killed a big numbers, a lot of people killed by these earthquakes, and cause significant damage to not only residentials, but also some critical infrastructures, including hospitals, schools, and many important infrastructures. And we may compare that earthquakes with an earthquake that hit Haiti in 2010. The Haiti earthquakes considered to be one of the most destructive earthquakes, because the earthquakes killed more than almost 300,000 people killed by the earthquakes in Haiti in 2010. And last year we have almost the same magnitude earthquakes with the 2010 earthquakes, the 2021 earthquakes, and these earthquakes in Haiti kills more than 1,000 people. So understanding the earthquakes, understanding the source of disaster is very important. As I mentioned, that after the disasters, not only we suffer from economic loss, but most importantly that significant numbers of people also killed by the earthquakes and other disasters as well. And a flood that hit British Virgin Islands August 5 years ago. And this kind of disasters, flash flood, is frequently happens in a country like Indonesia as well. For example, in Bandung, if we have rains more than 4 hours, then we have a high probability of having flash flood. And flash flood may also cause significant numbers of economic losses. And for example, 2 years ago in Bandung, five people killed by the flash flood. So having a good understanding of flash flood is very important. And one way to understand the flash flood is having a good the flood maps. Flood risk map is very important, including understanding the climate system in our country. Okay, let me continue with the next slide. According to UN General Assembly, the UN already defined several key terminology in disaster risk reduction, several key keywords that we need to understand if you want to reduce the risk. The first key terminology is we need to understand what is disaster, what is vulnerability, exposures, preventions, mitigations, resilience, hazard, underlying disaster risk drivers, and disaster risk. So there are about 9 concepts that needs to be understood, 9 key terminologies that need to be understood if we want to reduce the risk that according to UN General Assembly. I just want to explain some of them, some of the key terminologies in disasters. The first one is the meanings of disasters. According to UN General Assembly, disaster is a serious disruptions of the functionings of the community or a society in any scale, as long as the community are affected, the functioning of community and society are affected, so we can call it as a disasters. And disaster is an interactions process between exposures, vulnerability, and capacity. That's the concept of disasters. And another concept is, and another key terminology is risk. Risk is different with disaster. Risk is a potential loss of life, injury, or destroy or damage asset, which could occur or which could not occur. So in terms of risk, we have what we call as a probability functions. As you might understand, if you throw a dice, then maybe you will have 1, 6, 2, or 5. So it's a kind of probability. Risk is also a probability. And then the question is, why we need to see risk as a probability? Because hazard is a function of probability. For example, one of the good examples of the probability of the hazard is, for example, the rains. So we cannot say 100% sure that for the next 2 hours we will have a rains. We just can predict a forecast with a certain degree of confidence that for the next 2 hours we will have the rains. So it's kind of the probability function. So hazard is a probability. That's the reason why risk is also a probability, because risk is a function of hazard, exposures, vulnerability, and capacity. And process, phenomena, or human activity that may cause loss of life, injury, or have impacts, property damage, social and economical disruptions, or environmental degradation. So hazard is a process, is a phenomena. So that's why sometimes we call hazard is a probability function, because it's a kind of, if it is a natural hazard, so it may comes from the natural process. And the terminology number 4 is mitigations. Mitigations is the lessening or minimizing of the adverse impacts of hazardous events. So any method that may reduce the disaster, or a simple answer to the hazard problems, is a mitigations. I will explain in detail about mitigations later on. So if you have any comments or questions, you may just write it on the chat box. So if you have anything, comments or something that you want to share with us, just let us know. And Bu Alvita, please let me know if I don't have enough time to finish my presentations.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so let me continue with the next slides. And this figure just to show you the 10 countries, the top 10 countries with most disasters. So the red bar shows the numbers of affected, the number of disasters, while the blue cycle shows the economic losses. So the reason why I'm showing this figure, just want to show you that some countries disproportionately affected by disasters compared to other countries. For example, if you take a look, China, for example, China has 286 numbers of disasters from the periods 2005 until 2014. And in terms of the economic loss, China suffers 265 billion US dollars in during the last during the 10 years from 2005 until 2014. And let us compare with Japan, for example. Japan only experienced 82 disaster, but the economic losses is very significant. And also you may see with other countries, for example, Pakistan and India as well. So you can see that some countries disproportionately affected by disasters. And in terms of the economics and human impacts, these figures I took from UNDRR, and you can see that, for example, in 2010, we have the Haiti earthquakes, and people affected by these earthquakes is 260 million people affected, and almost more than 300,000 people killed in the years 2000 and 2010s. And one of the most one of the major contributors for the economic losses and also the human impacts is the 2010 Haiti earthquakes. And let us compare with the in 2011, the 2012, the 2011 tsunami that hit east coast of Japan. The economic losses is very huge, to 364 billion US dollars, but the economic but the people killed is only 30,000. So you can see the different numbers from 2010 and 2000. the Haiti earthquakes compares to the Japan earthquake and tsunami. So in Japan's, they have more economic losses compared to the Haiti, but the Haiti had more human impacts compared to the Japan's earthquake and tsunami. And according to Weston, there are several characteristics of disasters. The number one, disaster is an extreme phenomena of different origins. So it has to be an extreme. It has to be non-routine events. So we cannot say if we have one area that hit almost every year by flood, we cannot say that it is a disaster. Maybe it is just because disaster has to be a non-routine and extreme phenomena. So then we cannot say the routine event as a disaster, because disaster has to be an extreme phenomena. If it is routine, then we already understand that in the future the same flood may happen. So then we can do something to reduce the effects of the same disaster in the future, if it is a routine event. And the second characteristic of disaster, it has large intensity. For example, a measurable quantify, such as an earthquake's intensity, water depth. If it is the earthquakes, then the magnitude of the earthquakes has to be very large. If it is water depth, and it has to be a very deep water depth. And the third characteristic is limited durations, which can vary from second to month. For example, the earthquakes that hit Japan's, the duration is 300 seconds. 300 seconds is quite long for the earthquakes, but maybe it is not long enough if we compare with the floods. And the next characteristic of disaster, it occurs at a certain locations. This is a spatial components will be very important in terms of disaster. So we need to understand the spatial components of disaster. And the next characteristic, involving a complex interplay between physical conditions and the human system. So disaster is a conjunction between physical process and the human dimension. So they are two domains that meet the physical process with the human dimension, the human system. And the next characteristic of disasters, disaster may cause loss of lives and threats to public health, as well as a physical damage. And the next characteristic of disaster, disruptions of livelihood system and society. And this is one of the most important characteristics of disaster, exceeding local capacities and resources. Exceeding local capacities and resources. And I think it is very interesting because the same magnitude of earthquakes, let's say magnitude 7 earthquakes, or the same magnitude of the volcanic eruption index, let's say 5 or 4. So the same magnitude of earthquakes or the same magnitude of volcanic eruptions can be translated differently by different society. So maybe some society said, magnitude 7 of earthquakes is okay. It is not a disaster for us. Why? Because they have a very strong capacity. But for another regions with a very low capacity, even earthquakes with a very small magnitude, let's say magnitude 4, is already disaster for them. Because the magnitude 4 of the earthquakes exceeding their own capacities. But for another community, which is a very strong community, earthquakes with magnitudes, let's say, it is not exceed the capacity, because they are very strong. They have a lot of capacity. They have a lot of resources. So the same magnitude earthquakes, the same magnitude volcanic eruption, the same intensity of typhoon, tsunami can be translated differently by different society. It depends on how strong the capacity of the local communities. And the last characteristic of disaster, it requires outside assistance to cope with. It requires help from outside. That's the reason why we need a friends from neighboring countries to help us during disasters. Okay, let me explain in more detail the difference between disaster and risk. A disaster is a function of the risk process. So disaster is a function of a risk process. As I mentioned earlier, risk results from combinations of hazard, conditions of vulnerability, and insufficient capacity. So there are three different components that contribute to the risk. The first one is hazard, and it may be a single hazard or a multi-hazard. And the second one is vulnerability, and the last one is the capacity. So there are three different components, but some of the scientists said that vulnerability can be also combined into capacity. So essentially there are two components, hazard and vulnerability, because capacity is also part of the vulnerability. And hazard may include latent conditions that may represent future threats. When the threat become a reality, so when the hazard become reality and the risk become disaster. So when the hazard become reality, so when the high intensity of rains become reality and the rains become the flood, so the risk of flood become reality. So from this concept, to some extent, we may estimate the risk before disasters. So we may understand the probability of having disaster in the future if we can calculate the risk beforehand. So if we have already a good risk maps, then we know we can understand in the futures with some understanding of the probability, we may have a disaster in the future. For example, for the earthquakes, usually for the earthquake, we use a probability 10% in 50 years, or percent in 50 years. We may have a kind or significant numbers of losses to the earthquake risk with certain magnitudes, for example. So we can calculate the risk before disaster happens. So the question is, why we need to calculate risk? What kind of benefits that we may get if we understand the risk before disaster, of course. So if we understand the risk, if we have a good information about the risk, then we can do to reduce the risk in the futures. So if you already understand that we have a certain level of hazard, and we also understand we have a certain level of vulnerability, then we may lower our vulnerability, or we may increase our capacity to reduce the risk. So we can, for example, this is the, you may see the cycles, the yellow cycle, the risk, and on the left side we have the hazard, in the right side we have the vulnerability. So we can make the yellow colors become smaller if we have a smaller vulnerability, then the risk will be very small. If we cannot reduce the hazard, the only way to reduce the risk is to reduce the vulnerability or increase our capacity. So when disaster happens, then the impact of disasters will become idea of having informations of risk, having the knowledge of risk. If you already understand risk, then we can reduce the components of risk. And so in the futures, we can reduce the cause of disasters, the effect of disasters. This one,
sorry,
yes.
We have 5 minutes left, Dr.
Okay.
Irwan. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Alvita. So this is a figures showing the economic losses versus the level of development. If the level of the development is on the early stage of the development process, then the economic losses of disasters will be very low. So in the less developing countries, if the disaster happen, the economic losses will be very low. It probably will be very low, but the casualties will be very high. But for the developed countries, if the level of development is very high, then the economic losses is very high, but the casualties will be very low. So the same earthquakes, the same magnitude will cause different effects for different countries. It depends on the level of development. And as I mentioned earlier, disaster mitigation is a simple answer to hazard problems. And disaster mitigation is a method that we can apply to reduce the risk. But probably in order to reduce the risk, it tends to be costly, disruptive, time-consuming, and in some cases, socially unpalatable. And it may compete with a numbers of other issues. For example, Indonesia's the risk, the disaster mitigation need to compete with others development issues. For example, we want to develop dams, we want to develop another infrastructures. So if we put disaster mitigation, probably the dam will be very expensive, or our infrastructure also will be very expensive. Okay, maybe this is my last slide. So I just want to explain the Sendai framework for DRR. DRR is very important frameworks. The Sendai framework for DRR established 4 years after the Sendai earthquake and tsunamis. And this is the first major agreements. And then and the Sendai framework consists of 7 global targets. The 7 global targets are global target A, to reduce global disaster mortality by 2030, and global target B, to reduce the numbers of affected peoples globally. Yeah, so the first target is to reduce mortality, and the second target is to reduce the affected peoples, and the target C is to reduce the economic losses, and the target D is to reduce disaster damage to the critical infrastructures, and target E is to increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategy, and global target F is to enhance international cooperations, and target G, it addresses the importance of multi-hazard early warning system and disaster risk information assessment. So they are, and so basically for the Sendai framework for DRR, they are 4 substantially reductions and 4 substantially increases. So those are very important framework for disaster risk reductions. And this disaster risk reduction may also link to the SDGs goal. So you can see that the framework A, B, and C, and D. So every framework has a very good link with the And for the next slides, you may see that this is a method for calculating disaster risk estimation. So we need to calculate the hazard, and also we need to calculate the exposure, hazard, and vulnerability. So I really hope next year you can do this calculation by yourself. I'm very happy to discuss with you how to calculate the disaster risk. And this is our example. This disaster, the one on the top figure showing the earthquake disaster, the one on the lower left is for the flood, and the one on the lower right is for the tsunamis. And this is the exposure, this type of the housings. And this is the example of disaster risk estimation. This is annual disasters loss ratio per province in Indonesia due to the earthquakes. We have also the same calculation for flood, tsunamis, and other type of disaster. Okay, thank you for your kind attention. This photo is taken a few days ago in one of the islands in the eastern Indonesia.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Irwan Melano. Such an interesting presentation. We have so little time, so many interesting concepts about disaster risk reduction that Dr. Irwan Melano gave to us. And hopefully we can continue it again next time. So Dr. Irwan Melano already gives us a key terminology in disaster risk reduction, Sendai framework, and how close the DRR to sustainable development goals, and also about disaster risk estimation. It's a very important and interesting topics, especially about the disaster risk estimation. So we have one question on the chat box from Tash von Doimen from Guyana. It said that there was a term before disaster risk on the previous slide. Could you kindly explain that? Maybe Dr. Irwan on the earlier slide. There was a term before disaster risk.
Yes, before the risk, actually, there are 9 important terms, key terminology in disaster risk reduction as proposed by UN General Assembly. Disaster, vulnerability, exposures, preventions, mitigations, resilience, hazard, underlying disaster risk drivers. So that's the things that probably being asked by Tash van Doimen. So before disaster risk, this is a very interesting terminology, underlying disaster risk drivers. The underlying disaster risk driver is these underlying factors that leads someone to be more vulnerable. For example, the underlying disaster risk driver is some people are more vulnerable than others. The low income peoples are more vulnerable. So the income is the underlying disaster risk drivers. And also there are some, for example, in Indonesia, there are some vulnerable people. For example, fishermen is a peoples with these people is a group of people that has the disaster risk underlying drivers. So I hope I answer your questions.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Dr. Irwan. Hope it's enough. Tash, maybe do you want to ask something more, or is it okay for you for now? I think yes. Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Irwan Melano, once again. Thank you for the
Okay, welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you so
yes,
much.
he did. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Tash, also for the question. Okay, so there is one more question. I think one question. Is that okay? Another one question, Dr. Irwan. This is from Louverture Austin. It asks that what is the difference between vulnerability and risk? I think it's the one question that also on the quiz about the difference between vulnerability and risk. Please, Dr. Irwan.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alvita. From the chat box, I found another questions before that. Okay, but that's okay.
Okay. From Javier. I'm sorry. From Javier Castellanos. I'm sorry, sir. I just read your question. Please review the method for calculating the risk last slide. I'm so sorry, Mr. Javier. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Irwan.
Yes, I think thank you for your thank you for asking this question. So well, the risk calculations, there are several methods in calculating the risk. It depends on the purpose of the calculations. One of the important purpose of the risk calculations is for the spatial plannings for the risk reductions. And another purpose for the risk calculations, for example, in order to calculate annual risk for disaster risk financing. And probably this is a slight difference between the purpose for the spatial plannings and for the calculating disaster risk financing for the calculating risk for disaster risk financing. But basically, in order to calculate the risk, we need basically we need the informations of the hazard, the sources, the source of the hazard, and we need to calculate the hazard is in a stochastic or probabilistic source as a stochastic or probabilistic source models. So that's the first one, is calculating hazard. For example, if you want to calculate the hazard of forest fire, for example, if you want to calculate the risk of forest fires, then the first step, you need to calculate the stochastic model or probabilistic model of forest fires. Or if you want to calculate the hazard of flood, then you need to estimate the stochastic or probabilistic models of the hazard. And after that, you need to understand the exposures. What is the element of risk that you want to calculate? For example, you want to calculate your risk, the forest fires hazard into, for example, into the housing or the school. Then you need to understand the exposures, the exposure of your school, the taxonomy, the type of your school, the type of buildings. For example, in Indonesia, the most common type of buildings for the school is the masonry, usually the masonry or maybe concrete type of buildings. Then you need to understand the vulnerability functions of that buildings. Then after you understand, after you have the good informations of the hazard and the exposures and the vulnerability functions, you combine all those three things, then you calculate then you may calculate the damage. The damage can be calculated by the estimations, the degree of hazard and the degree of the vulnerability. Then you can calculate the damage. After the calculate the damage, then you can calculate the loss. Then you have the risk map after that. So I really hope that I answer your questions. I think it's much easier if we if we do it together. So, Ibu Afita, I hope I answered the questions.
Yes, sure, Dr. Irwan Melano, thank you very much. Yes, maybe we can later do some assessment about that. So all the participants do it together with you. Okay, so actually there are more questions, but I think the time is so limitless. For question from Mr. Carl Smith, also from Liverton Austin, do you mind if we ask Dr. Irwan Melano to answer the question separately, but we are promised we will answer both of your questions. I'm so sorry because the time is so limited, and we already have the second panelist with us today. Okay.
Okay.
Do you mind, Dr. Irwan?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to write down my answer to the questions from Mr. Carl Smith and also the questions from.
We will also write it for you and send
okay.
it to you.
Okay.
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 No need to write it down right now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I need to write it down right now.
Okay.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Irwan
Okay,
Melano.
thank you so much. It is great pleasures to meet all of you, and I really hope that we can meet again next year in Bandung.
Yes,
hopefully, stay
indeed.
healthy.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will have Dr. Udreh that will present the second presentation about implementation of the DRR with the real case in Indonesia. Dr. Udreh is a director of risk mapping and evaluation of Indonesia National Disaster Management Agency. Dr. Udreh has a long record of contribution in Indonesia disaster management. Currently, he is the Director of Risk Mapping and Evaluation of Indonesia National Disaster Management Agency and Coordinator of Wireless Sensor Network System, Applied Technology for Flood Early Warning System. So without any further ado, the place is yours, Dr. Udreh.
Okay. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I don't know, morning or afternoon in your country. So I'm so happy to have an opportunity to discuss with you. I hope what I inform in this session can give an additional information because it is look like a continuation from what Dr. Irwan Melano has already mentioned. So the same as Pak Irwan Melano, I get also master and doctoral degree from Japan, from the University of Tokyo. And yeah, right now I am working in the National Disaster Management Authority of Indonesia. So within this maybe 20 or 30 minutes, I would like to share my experience in the implementation of DRR real case in Indonesia. But I would like to just inform you the activities mostly based on the my directorate. I think it is a very, very small part of the real case, but I hope maybe in the future we can discuss or have another meeting that we can also inform you the implementation from other activity. So from here, maybe from the it is already mentioned also maybe by Pak Irwan. So every year we have a natural hazard or disaster in Indonesia. Quite a lot of event. Here, let's say in 2021, about 5,402. And also in 2022, it is also quite a lot. Even it is just until some month in 2022 until April 30. So it's already 1,413. So something that I think is very important is how we can reduce disaster risk. It should start from the planning. So as you know that the terms that mentioned about failing to plan is planning to fail. So it is one of the strategy that Indonesia thing we need to do from the beginning. So we have a presidential decree number 18, year 2020. It is what we call as RIPB 2020 to 2044. RIPB is a national guideline for the implementation of disaster management. It is valid for 25 years and become a reference of all minister, agency, the Indonesian National Armed Force, Indonesian National Police, and the regional government in planning and implementing the implementation of disaster management. So all of the stakeholder actually, it should be more than this, should follow the this presidential decree for 25 years. It is very important for us for planning, as we know that if we do the development and after that we have a disaster, so the development will be shifting down quite a lot if we do not do anything for disaster management. Development is not applied. But when disaster development applied, so we can decrease the gap and we can recover much better than if we do nothing. And for the RIPB, so we have planning. It is about 100 year for our independent days. So we hope that in 2045 it's become a centennial resilient plan. So it is the what we call as the golden year when we can achieve the sustainable resilience of Indonesia from disaster. So we have 2020 to 2044. With the goal is to increase the resilience of the government, local governments, and the community in dealing with disaster and reduce disaster risk in the long term. About 5 targets, as already mentioned in this book. For one is strong regulatory framework and adaptive institutional cohesion in disaster management, increase investment in disaster risk preparedness and management in accordance with disaster risk projection. The third is improving the quality of professional, transparent, and accountable disaster management governance, fast and reliable disaster emergency management, and the last one is recovery of infrastructure, public services, post-disaster community livelihood that should be better and safer. Yeah, and to implement this long-term planning, so we have a 5-year planning, what we call Rencana Nasional Penanggulangan Bencana, or NSPB. It is a national disaster management planning. So from 2020 to 2044, so we make a short-term planning for 5 years. And it is also the same, it will become reference for preparation of disaster management program activity planning for all the stakeholders. And it is can be reviewed if after, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, we can make an adjustment regarding to how we can achieve. It is also maybe similar for all of the planning that we follow in the disaster management. And of course, to build that planning, we also follow from the global commitment to the national agenda that has already also mentioned by Dr. Irwan. So why it is important? So from that big planning, and we have a 5-year planning. So because Dr. Irwan mentioned a lot about the risk. So it is the understanding risk will be begin from or started from the disaster risk assessment. It is sorry, one point is I forget to explain spatial-based planning, and from the disaster risk assessment, we use the disaster risk assessment to make a disaster management planning. So to implement the RIPB or NSPB, so we build what we call disaster risk assessment. From disaster risk assessment, we build disaster management planning. And from this disaster management planning, all of the step of planning from before disaster until recovery, it is mentioned or followed from the disaster management planning. We have disaster mitigation planning, disaster contingency planning, emergency response planning, disaster recovery planning. So these four planning actually has the same goal to that the implementation of the implementation of integrated, structured, directed, and measurable disaster management. So everything should be under a good planning. So it is one of important example. Let me see the what you indicate of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development mentioned about the safe ocean. It is a tsunami vision for the decade that a safe ocean is not an ocean in which tsunamis do not occur. So it is one of what we call is understanding risk. So we understand that it has a tsunami. It is an ocean in which tsunamis are understood, observed, and their impact is accurately predicted before they reach the coast. So it is what the most important thing when we try to make an assessment, because from the assessment we can have an understanding from the observation, and we understand the impact accurately. And it is the knowledge we use because we have a good understanding. So the ocean, we still use the ocean for life, work, recreate along its our arm-based knowledge. So everything we have a risk knowledge and prepare to act before a tsunami strike. So we can do nothing if we don't have a risk assessment map, a risk assessment concept that we can use as a guidance to make a planning. So we have like, let's say ocean. It is spatial based that we are doing in my directorate. So we have, let's say here is hazard. We have hazard we understood well, like tsunami generation, let's say from earthquake and or also from other. So from here we have information, let's say the potential what the lead time, tsunami height, inundation. It is actually come from a lot of institution. So we have institution who responsible to make a hazard map. And from that, we let's say we have make a detailed assessment with to make an understanding risk. Let's say in this second figure, we can see the tsunami inundation and the house that are under in the tsunami inundation location. So from here, we can understand how many people, how many house, and can calculate as well the potential loss from here. So it is like Irwan also mentioned that I mostly also use that risk is from the equation is the hazard multiplied by vulnerability and divided by the capacity. So from that we if we understand detail in this condition, let's say we can make an evacuation modeling. Here is the, let's say we can make a modeling of zero victim because we understand about the lead time, we understand about the tsunami high, and also we understand about how the tsunami inundation. And from here we can see how people can move and how many people still hit by the tsunami. And from there we can use this the risk assessment as a guideline for making evacuation sign, evacuation route, mitigation model, evacuation shelter, and also to educate the people. And then we have a safe ocean goal is achieved. So sorry. Okay, so from some years, so we are also use the risk assessment and focus, let's say, for the tourism destination and regional based risk assessment. So it is very important because it is more than not only for local risk assessment, because in the tourism area, we will have a lot of people during, let's say, the high season, and also the risks become higher because a lot of people coming. And also we build the regional based risk assessment. It means that we do not focus only for one region, one country, or one city, or one regency, but we try to understand, because hazard will not understand about the region of the local government. So it is very interesting, because from here we can work together to solve the problem. Let's say, like here we do it in the one of the tourism priority of Indonesia. So from here we do such kind of the focus group discussion, deep interview, and also field survey. So from here we can understand more detail about the risk. And also for regional assessment, like here, it is sometimes in Indonesia, of course, regulation based on the local government. But let's say when we discuss about the problem of the flood, so we must manage it together. So from the risk assessment, we try to make it in the big area like this, that include a lot of the local government that need to work together to solve the problem. And from here we will have an memorandum of understanding that every local government must do something, and also must have their own budget to share, to work together. And in order to make this activity better, because of course we would like to have become more detail every time, to have a good map quality. So we need to have a technical assistance. So it is what kind the kind of activities that every year we have to do. So we give an assistant see for how to make the risk assessment map. Sometimes we also invite them to come to Jakarta, or we will come to their location. And now to make the, it is as already compulsory. It means that the local government now, regency level, must make their own disaster map. It is already mentioned in the decree of the Ministry of Public Work. Ministry of Home Affairs, that every district, every city must make their own disaster risk assessment as basic to build all of the planning, and it must be included with their yearly development planning. So from this activity, so when we have a planning, so we must follow that planning 1 year what kind of the activities that we need to solve the to reduce the risk. So from this activity, every year we have an evaluation. To evaluate, we call it is the Indonesian Disaster Risk Index. So every year we will assess every district to how far they can do to reduce the risk. It is one of the example. It is from we can see every year how people do some the activity. It means that from the local government, central government, all of stakeholders doing together, and how this effort can reduce the risk. It is sometimes quite difficult for us when we must calculate the difference if the hazard increasing. So it is mostly calculated by the capacity, because capacity shows how people try to do. It is controllable compared to the hazard that it is mostly cannot be controlled by people. So from here, we try to make it better. We try to evaluate and try to find next year planning how we can achieve a better result for every province and every district. And one example we have in ARIS, it is one of all of the map already inputted in here, and people also give some information, and assessment can be done by INARIS mobile, personal mobile. And I would like to show you some example from this demo. So give me some minutes just to show the example of this. Okay. How long I still have a time?
Yes, I'm about to tell you. It's only 5 minutes left,
Okay,
Dr. Udreh. Thank you.
Enough, I think, for okay. Okay, everybody, can you see these maps?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so it is all of the map that we built for all Indonesian region will be put in the INARIS. So everybody actually can use this risk map, hazard map, this also capacity and etc. For all this, sorry, in Bahasa Indonesia, it is about the, let's say if we would like to see the flood, so we just click here. So it will change to flood. If we would like to put the tsunami, earthquake, so we can choose, let's say, earthquake, and also after that we can choose with it if we would like to show hazard, vulnerability, capacity, or risk. And the important thing of here, it is we can put this one also together with a lot of information, including the location of house of the school like this. It is the data of school is come from the Ministry of Education, and we can check every information from here. So actually, the system can calculate how big the risk of every school, and also we can calculate the region with a high risk, and how much money that can lose, and how many, let's say, school in the high risk location, and etc. And from here we can see also the school and the other information regarding to the school. Not only the school, of course, we can calculate other information. Let's say about the hospital and important facility, public facility, and etc. So it is we can also put the all of the document of the risk assessment. If you move to the put in the search. Let's say if you would like to put here is I just put Bandung because I need to make it faster. So we can choose one location that we need to get, and after that we can download the risk assessment document and also the map. So it is very useful for people. And also sometimes it is one of the example when we have assessment about the data for tourism. Let's say it is one of the very famous tourism destination. From here we can put let's say again some of information about the hazard or other, and also the facilities that we have already have, like here in Labuan Bajo we have already have the location of the tsunami sign, and also the location of how people can evacuate and come to the shelter. So from here, everything is actually come from the last one is here. So it is one very important example. So the red one is actually the location that potentially is high potential. It is about the earthquake, and it is from the location of in Pasaman Barat that has earthquake in February 25. And we can see this green and black, red and orange is the location of houses that collapse caused by the earthquake. And we can see from here the location is mostly a good relationship with the high risk location. And also during this Pasaman Barat earthquake, we also it is not one hazard, single hazard, but also multi hazard. We have a flash flood and also the landslide. And if we put the risk map, our risk map for, let's say, a landslide, yeah, we close the tsunami, so we can see that the location of the landslide here is have a good correlation with the high risk of landslide as well as the flash flood. And this map also contributed by all a lot of participants, like a drone actually get from the group of drone, and also from the related institution that put together their map, and we can combine all together like this. So it is some of I think it's a good example for us how we can work together to reduce the disaster. Thank you very much. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Udreh, for the insightful presentation. There is such a catchy tagline on the first of your session. It's failing to plan is planning to fail. It's very interesting tagline. So you already give us the concept about the disaster risk assessment, the linkage of global commitment to the national agenda, and how important is the collaboration among institutions. So is there any question from the participant? Please feel free. You can write your question on chat box, or you can just raise your hand, please. Is there any question? Okay, so while we are waiting from the question from our participant, Dr. Udreh, I want to ask you something. So your map that you share about the risk assessment, can you tell us all the parameters that been used to make such a map?
Yeah, okay. So to build a map, actually it is not done by ourselves. So like Pak Irwan said before, so like disaster earthquake map hazard, it come from the Pusgen. Maybe you know this center of earthquake. So every hazard has their own responsible institution, and from that responsible institution, we have already get various hazard map. But in vulnerability and also capacity, we have our own assessment coming to discuss with the local government, as well as have field survey to calculate that capacity and vulnerability. It has a lot of assessment tools with a lot of question to get some information that we can use to build the information of what the vulnerability as well as the capacity. And from here, because the risk map is the combination of these three parameters, so we can build the risk map. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers, Dr. Udre. So I think if there is no other question, so we already come to the end of the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Udre, once again. And also thank you very much, Dr. Irwan and Dr. Udre, for such a fruitful session and discussion. Also, thank you to our participants that already excitedly joined this session. So I'm signing off, and back to you, Miss Lydia.
Dankeschön, Dr. Alvita, as the moderator who have led the main program. As a ton of thanks to all the speakers has give us the informative and insightful presentation. So those are the agendas for today. And we have finished our opening ceremony for today. And don't forget to come again tomorrow exactly at the same time as today. And the topic tomorrow is about the impact chain of geological hazard and increasing community resilience. For more future information, please check on the EdNet's learning system. You can find a lot of information and activities, and I hope you have a pleasant day. Don't forget to take a note and get ready for the next stage. Gracias, adios, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you tomorrow all.